All right, so get this. Amazon has over 750,000 robots working for them.
Wow.
It's wild, right? Like, that's basically the entire population of Wyoming just churning away in warehouses.
It's a pretty stark visual.
I can make you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, what happens to all of us when the robots take over?
Ah.
So that's actually what we're diving into today, the potential downsides of all this automation.
Yeah, and it's not just Amazon, of course, right? They're just kind of the tip of the iceberg here, I think. What's really kind of unsettling is how this might affect the entire workforce. You know, it's a potential seismic shift we're looking at.
Totally. And we've actually got this Reddit thread here, and it's blowing up with opinions about this whole robot takeover thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there's this one comment that really stuck with me. It says, it's all fun and games until the robots take our jobs and our purpose.
It's a valid concern. I mean, just look at the numbers. Amazon has already replaced, over 100,000 jobs with robots? And that's just one company.
That's insane.
Right. So scale that up across all industries, and you can see how this could really make existing inequalities, even worse.
So you're saying, like, the rich get richer, the robot owners, and the rest of us are kind of like left scrambling.
Well, it's a definite possibility, right? I mean, the wealth generated by automation is probably going to go to corporations, right? And then, to these highly skilled folks who actually design and manage these systems.
Yeah.
But what about, the folks who are most at risk of being replaced, the low-skill workers? Where do they fit into this whole equation?
It's like a whole class of people just becomes obsolete.
It's a legitimate concern.
It's kind of scary, honestly.
Yeah.
But I did see one comment in the thread that was like, hey, nobody complains about machines taking over dangerous jobs, right?
Yeah.
Like mining or construction.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, automation can be a good thing when it comes to, getting rid of those kinds of hazardous jobs, for sure. But the thing is, it doesn't stop there. I mean, that same commenter went on to say, any job that can be automated will be automated. Companies will do anything to save a buck. And that's, I think, the real issue here.
It's like a slippery slope, Where do we draw the line?
That's exactly the question. What happens when practically every single job can be done by a robot?
Right.
I mean, think about the social unrest, the pressure on our social safety nets, the psychological impact of, mass unemployment.
Yeah. And some people in the thread were even talking about like poverty and crime rates going up as people are struggling to just like survive.
And those are extreme scenarios for sure.
Yeah.
But they highlight the very real risks here.
Definitely.
We can't just assume that technology is going to solve everything. There are social and ethical dimensions we need to consider very carefully.
Absolutely. But didn't some people argue that automation could actually like boost the economy?
Yeah.
And create new jobs? Like, isn't that a possibility?
Oh, it's definitely possible. But there's a catch, right? The new jobs created by automation, they're going to require specific skills and training.
Right.
So what happens to all those folks who don't have those skills? What about the millions of workers who are displaced? Do they just become irrelevant?
It's like that whole thing we were talking about, a whole class of people just deemed unemployable.
Exactly. And that brings us to the really big questions, the ethical questions at the heart of all of this.
Okay.
Is it right for companies to put profit before people? What responsibility do they have to the workers whose livelihoods are, being completely disrupted by this technology?
Yeah.
It's tricky.
It's a big question.
Yeah, it's a tough one, a really complex situation, and there are no easy answers. We're talking about like redefining the whole social contract, in the age of automation.
Yeah. Totally. And the Reddit thread, people were throwing out all kinds of solutions, but none of them seemed like, the magic bullet.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about taxing robots.
Oh, yeah, that came up a lot.
Like, if they're taking human jobs, they should be contributing to the social safety net.
That makes sense, right? On the surface, at least.
Yeah.
But like, how do you even tax a robot? What are the metrics? How do you stop companies from finding loopholes?
Yeah, exactly. The logistics are a nightmare. And then there's the whole question of, would it actually stifle innovation, or would it just shift the burden somewhere else?
Right.
It's a really complex debate that's, just getting started.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing that came up a lot was bolstering organized labor. But can unions really keep up with the speed of all this tip change?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, The traditional union models might need to, evolve a bit to adapt to a workforce that's more and more reliant on automation. Like maybe we need to completely rethink how we even, think about labor representation when robots are doing most of the work.
Yeah, that's wild to think about.
Yeah.
What about the retraining and education piece? Like, what if we're just training people for jobs that are just going to get automated anyway?
That's a problem for sure. It's like the skills gap is constantly changing. I mean, it's impossible to predict what the job market's going to look like even a couple of years from now.
Right.
Maybe the focus should be on, teaching people how to adapt, how to think critically, how to problem solve, those kinds of things that can be applied to, lots of different jobs.
Oh, yeah. There's a great comment about that in the thread. Someone said, like, we're teaching people how to climb a ladder when the ladder itself is disappearing.
Yeah, I saw that one. That's a perfect analogy. It really highlights how we need to fundamentally rethink our whole, economic systems. Like we can't just assume that the old ways are going to work in a world where, machines can do almost everything better than humans.
So we just give up then? Just let the robots take over?
Not necessarily,
Yeah.
but we got to be proactive, not reactive, right? We have to be asking the hard questions. Like, what's the point of work if you don't need it to survive? How do we share the wealth when human labor isn't really driving productivity anymore?
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
We talked about universal basic income earlier, and people in the thread were all over the place on that one. Some thought it was like the only way forward. Others thought it would lead to total societal collapse.
It's a really interesting concept, UBI, but it's definitely not, a perfect solution. There are all kinds of questions about, work incentives and whether it's actually sustainable and what the unintended consequences might be.
Right.
It's a big gamble.
It feels like we're like standing at the edge of this huge societal shift, and we don't even know where to put our feet.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, that's exactly where we are. Like, we're in uncharted territory. There's no map. No one's done this before.
It's pretty daunting when you think about it. It feels like the problem is like bigger than any solution.
It's definitely a multifaceted challenge.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we should just, throw up our hands and give up. We need to, approach this with urgency, yeah, but also with like creativity and a willingness to work together, to collaborate.
So what can we do then?
Yeah.
Like as individuals,
Yeah.
besides, freaking out?
Well, the first thing is stay informed, right? Learn about the potential impacts of automation and the solutions people are proposing and the bigger picture, how it's going to affect society as a whole and talk about it, share your thoughts and question everything.
Don't just scroll past those headlines,
Yeah.
right? Like actually dig in and try to understand what's really happening.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to think outside the box. We need creative solutions, new approaches, and a willingness to question the status quo. This isn't just about, economics and technology. This is about shaping the kind of future we want to live in.
I think that's a great point to move into our final segment. We've talked a lot about the potential downsides of automation, and it might seem kind of bleak, but it's not all doom and gloom, right? There are things we can do, and maybe even more importantly, we have a chance to actually shape a future where technology works for us, not the other way around. So we've talked about a lot of scary stuff, about how automation could really change things. But like, what do we actually do about it? What are the real steps we can take to like make sure things don't go totally off the rails?
Well, it's not about, hitting the brakes on progress, right? It's about making sure that progress happens in a way that's responsible. And there are definitely some ideas out there. We talked about the robot tax, which is like trying to deal with the economic side of things. And then there are other ideas about, giving workers more power. But it's probably going to take a bunch of different approaches to really make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the robot tax, let's dig into that a little more. On the surface, it seems kind of simple, right? Robots are taking jobs, so they should pay taxes, just like the people they're replacing. But is it really that easy?
I mean, if only it were that simple. The problem is, like, how do you even define a robot for tax purposes? Is it like a robotic arm on a factory line or a self-driving truck? What about like an algorithm that's managing investments? And then how do you figure out their income in a way that's, actually fair and doesn't like kill innovation?
Yeah, it sounds like there are a lot of ways for companies to like whittle out of it and for things to like backfire. What about the idea of, giving workers more power? Like, can unions actually do anything in this whole new world of robots and AI?
Unions definitely need to change, that's for sure. But the basic idea of collective bargaining, workers coming together to negotiate, that's still really important. As automation spreads to more and more industries, workers are going to need a strong voice to fight for fair pay, safe working conditions, and to make sure they're not just thrown away as technology gets better.
It's about making sure that progress doesn't just leave people behind.
Yeah.
But what about the skills gap we talked about? Like, even if unions get stronger, aren't there still going to be a lot of people who are left out in the cold if their skills just aren't needed anymore?
That's where education and retraining come in. But we got to be smart about it. Just training people for the jobs that exist right now might not be enough, right? The jobs might not be there in a few years. We need to focus on teaching people how to be flexible, how to think for themselves, how to solve problems. Those are the skills that are going to be useful no matter what the job market looks like in the future.
Yeah, it's about preparing people for a world where, the whole idea of work is changing. But even with all of that, I mean, some people are still going to struggle, right? What about the people who just can't adapt or retrain?
That's where an idea like universal basic income comes in. It's basically giving everyone a guaranteed income, whether they have a job or not. It's a pretty radical idea, but it's getting more attention as automation makes us rethink, the whole idea of work and how wealth is shared in society.
Yeah, UBI is a whole other conversation. There are really strong opinions on both sides. But it does show just how big this problem is, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about little tweaks here and there. We're talking about potentially completely changing the way our society works.
Yeah, that's exactly the conversation we need to be having. What does a fair and just society look like when, robots and AI are doing most of the work? What are our values, and how do we make sure that technology doesn't, destroy those values?
Okay, so deep breath. We've covered a lot. What do we do with all this? It's easy to feel kind of lost.
It is a huge challenge, but it's not hopeless, right?
Yeah.
The most important thing is to stay involved, learn as much as you can, talk about it with other people, question what you hear, and don't be afraid to get involved and try to make a difference.
Don't just check out, right? This is really important stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And think big, We need big ideas, new ways of looking at things, and a willingness to shake things up. This isn't just about robots, it's about what kind of world we want to live in.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up. It's been intense, but really important. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of automation. It's changing fast, but we can be a part of shaping that change. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a future where technology makes our lives better, not worse.